I'm actually going to start this video with a clip from the middle of it and then transition back into the middle of the video. So sorry for the little bit of a jump cut. Generally the idea when you're making changes with your deck is you want to identify the weakness and commit to, you either want to identify the strength of what's working in your deck, or if nothing's working in your deck, just sort of the case for this built to last deck, thinking about what's the smallest change I can make in my game plan while still executing on the idea of the deck. Hello everyone, I'm going to talk about my BTL list from the deck building concepts video, and talk about a little bit about how it performed in actual play and then what tweaks I made to fix its performance. So I'm going to very quickly fly through a representative game where we see basically the fundamental issue with the list, and I'll show you the list in a little more detail when I actually go into editing it. But basically this list was just trying to go very, very fast and close out the game with biotic labor. So I top deck a hostile score, the runner starts getting their econ going. I'm really, just for the sake of time, trying to fly through. I'm using wall to wall to draw more aggressively to get tempo. When I see an Oaktown, I install it, boom, and I try and gear check the runner. So I'm putting a code gate and a barrier, so the runner has to get 2 breakers out to get into this server. And you'll see, we're making a ton of money. A hostile takeover is net 7 credits for us because we spend 2 credits, but get 2 credits back from built to last. So this deck is printing money. The first advancement on Oaktown renovation gets us 4 credits for 1 cost, so it's 3 click. You're basically getting 3 credits and an advancement. The runner is building up very well. They've got lots of money. They're a quarter of the way through their deck already. They've got Earthrise drawing. They've got, daily cast ticking, so they're in a very solid spot. We score, so it's 3-0. Things are, in theory, going to plan. And we even draw, I believe, another. Okay, so we use sprint to draw. We find another agenda. We install it. We advance it. And so we are basically going about as fast as you could hope to possibly go. It's turn 5. We're threatening to get 5 points, which is a very big deal because that means we can biotic labor a 3/2 that we draw, and there's 4 of them in the deck. The runner installs SMC. We're a little sad. The runner installs a second SMC. Big overclock, and the game is basically over here. It's not 100% over because we do have both Ballista and Archer that we can use to fortify the remote. But they score, it's now tied up. Or actually, the runner is ahead. Ice, and put down the wall to wall. Basically, my greed is that money is irrelevant, so the government subsidies are a little slow. And now the runner has Echelon, 16 credits, and we have effectively lost this game because we have no tricks and we don't have enough tool. We would have to biotic twice to win this game, and the runner can basically top deck lock R&D on us. And we're going to see it's actually even more brutal than that. They run HQ, shut us down, and I'm not resing here, so they do have the money to get back, but we see the runner basically just is going to go and win the game here. We money up effectively enough. We res the Archer because it's sort of our only out is bankrupting the runner, but they're going to get through anyway. They're going to recover just fine. So I did make a bit of a misplay here. I should have probably kept the above the law and installed Afshar on HQ, with the idea that I can then biotic labor and at least get back to 4 agenda points. And there's routes to win from there that they're slim, but it's, I'm not playing to my outs quite correctly here. And eventually the runner just sort of gets enough accesses to win the game. Shutting down my Archer basically is game over. I like this Tau list a lot. I think Shutdown's a very cool card in Tau. It's something I kind of want to try. But this is basically how most of the games sort of are going. There's a couple of other I have a few other videos. I think one of them is on Twitch and I get the recording. The other is basically the exact same game, but what instead of the runner having all three breakers out, they had a botulus that they used, and all of my ice is 1 to 2 subs. So the cookbook down, all my ice melted away. And then I had another game against a Hoshiko where they had 3 breakers down on turn 6, and that was the end of the game. And so I went back to look at this list and was like, you know what? I can't just coin flip the first 6 turns and hope that wins me the game. I think I can build a better corp list than that. Alright, so let's talk about the changes I made to this list. So the first thing I was noticing is that I was advancing ice with wall to wall a lot more often than I was thinking when I was building the deck. It just didn't end up being that tempo negative. So the first card that stood out is maybe Trick of Light. Because if I had advancement counters on stuff already, this is giving me both credits and influence over Biotic Labor. So I made the 2 for 2 swap. The next thing I felt like was Predictive Planogram never felt that good. Wasn't the most bang for my buck, and what I really wanted to do was make a way for my my remotes to be punishing to check if the runner was rushing with me. Because if the runner is rushing, they're probably low on credits, and so Managarm Skunkworks starts to look really good. But this takes up a lot of influence, so I have to free some influence up. The other card that I was less impressed with was Sprint. Sprint I think is good when you're in sort of a combo-y mood, but this isn't really a combo deck. Ice Wall I was very, very unimpressed with because we have more money than you could possibly imagine. And so instead, a card like Pharos looks really interesting. I think I had one of Pharos in the actual video. That's my mistake. These are slightly mismatching lists. But Pharos starts to look really good. If we're routinely having 30 credits, Pharos means that we get to make a central really, really obnoxious to get through. In terms of other ice, I'm pretty heavy on code gates and sort of heavy on ice overall. So I don't know that I actually agree with the changes I actually make looking at them again, because what I end up doing is saying, oh, I don't really need the enigmas. Maybe I want some more draw. I literally never end up installing these CSR campaigns. I suspect they could go back to being enigmas, and this would be pretty good. So this is the list I end up running. And this list ends up being a lot more functional because it does a couple of things better. It's slightly better at taxing with 2 more Pharoses in the list. It's losing some of the weak ice. It's also playing a cheaper fast advance option, so we have more choices. And then Managarm Skunkworks, as we'll see in at least one of the replays, ends up doing a lot of work. It costs the runner a lot of time and a lot of credits to handle, which then is usually opening us up a second window. So the idea behind this list is now we're a little bit less rushy. We're going to build up a little bit more reward state. We're still going to score quickly because this ice isn't that good, but we'll be able to get to a point where we can win a lot faster. And I think if I was to keep tweaking with this list and adjusting it, these CSR campaigns would definitely get cut. Exactly for what, I don't know. The startup card pool is one I'm not as familiar with. Potentially they could go back to some enigmas. What else could we look at? We could maybe even look at something like a Malapert data vault, because what we end up finding is that you can do some fun stuff if you can play your Trick of Lights frequently. You could look at will sort of stand out. There's not that many other things. You could look at maybe a 1 of Retribution if people decide to float the tags from Pharos. That seems kind of cute, but probably too cute to be good. Colossus could be fine. I don't think almost anything else here makes a lot of sense. There's just not a ton of the card pool, and our influence I think is pretty well spoken for. So now, having talked a little bit about the changes, and I think generally the idea when you're making changes with your deck is you want to identify the weakness and commit to. You either want to identify the strength of what's working in your deck, or if nothing's working in your deck, which is sort of the case for this built to last deck, thinking about what's the smallest change I can make in my game plan while still executing on the idea of the deck. And basically the idea behind Managarm Skunkworks in this list is saying just ice isn't doing the job. There's too many tools for the runner to make just ice work. But Managarm Skunk Works means that we have something that's somewhat orthogonal to ice. And then Trig of Light also opens up some options to score our 4/2s if we have 2 Trig of Lights in hand. And so we've made these two, and then we've also made our ice a little more expensive to handle, which is all sort of working in tandem to make this list a little bit more robust in the mid game. We're not turning around and making a Glacier do nothing deck with Chaos by Grid. You can do that in Belt Blast, but here we're still trying to go quickly to threaten runners who maybe are more built for Glacier matchups. And so now I'm going to show us 2 matches against you, where I think both of them are good demonstrations of this deck working and ways that this runner and this deck loses. So off to the replays. Alright, so here's the first match against you. This was a pair of games we played back to back. I think both matches were pretty interesting. So let's get into them. So I mulliganed a pretty bad opening hand where it's just 2 CSR campaigns, 2 pieces of ice, one of which I don't want to res, and Oaktown, which is, while an okay agenda, not the best unless I can get behind 2 pieces of resable ice quickly. I end up drawing into a not that different hand. And so one of the ideas behind this deck is, I can rush a little bit less, so doing something like install, advance, and spin doctor. This is a bit of a slower start than I would see in some of my other stuff. I'm not trying to rush out an agenda on turn 2. So I have 2 options on this turn. Either I can score the hostile takeover and discard one of the cards, probably the hedge fund, because I'm going to want most of the other cards, potentially the spin doctor instead of the hedge fund. But I think I opt to play this a little bit slower, because basically I do feel like the deck is a little bit more resilient in the mid game. I think in retrospect, going fast would be fine here, but not discarding when you don't have to can be good in some cases, in other cases it's a little bit tricky. One thing you will note, just from seeing, because I forgot to turn on the bar to turn off the runner's hand, I generally would prefer playing the Sure Gamble over playing the Buzzsaw here, and the reason basically is hidden information. It's less valuable for the corp to me to know that you have 11 credits than it is for me to know which exact breakers you have installed. That's a small thing, but it makes a big difference. If I knew you have a Buzzsaw installed, I'm not going to bother installing an Enigma on my scoring remote. It's just an irrelevant card. And so this gives me more information on my draws about how to make them to best suit the game state. So because you're going to spend a click both on Gamble and on Buzzsaw, do the Gamble first because it gives away less information to the corp. And here we see you end up basically breaking themselves, breaking a Whoredom for a single access. It's much better to let the corp gain 1 credit than to spend 4 credits on a single access in most cases. It's not gonna, I'm already on 14, having 1 more credit doesn't make a huge difference. And here, because I see a barrier breaker and a decoder down, I get to just put down my sentry and say, this is what I'm scoring out behind, and just making money that I probably don't need. And here the archer is very nice because it means it's harder for Botchless Boomerang to just walk through the server. And so now we get to install advance. I think there's a case that you could make for just installing Adore, hitting Liberated twice, and then challenging server 3, assuming that I don't have 2 sentries. Oh no, Adore works just fine, even if they are both sentries, which they are. And that would actually basically win you the game here. They go for a line that's okay, what I don't love, because I'm windmilling out agendas. It seems unlikely to me that I'm building them up in HQ that much. It's 3-0 here, which is great for me. Another thing you could be looking at doing here is once they find a leech, they can basically start stargating R&D every turn. So drawing pretty aggressively is good here. Um, you could potentially even draw on this last click here because you're not going to use the second liberated most likely, or probably actually better is just ditching the overclock. I single advance the Atlas because getting an Atlas with a token is generally something I like doing. This is maybe stronger in Standard than it is in Startup, as we'll sort of see here. It just doesn't quite do enough. Now, the reason I do it is basically because here, there's a lot of ways for me to be okay if this Atlas gets stolen with this Atlas token in my hand, or if the Trick of Light gets imped. So the Atlas token's very nice. The one issue is I haven't spent enough time advancing my ice, and this is maybe a sign that Trick of Light could be an issue. So I actually just spend the turn advancing and taking a credit because I don't have anything else to do. I'm happy to stall for a turn. Potentially I could actually have discarded the Atlas to make it very, very safe, so I can Spin Doctor it away and then pull it out of my deck at instant speed. But I think it's slightly safer in HQ. It's unlikely the runner's going to try and challenge what's very telegraphed to be an Cat, just because they don't want to give me the free advancement. Some of these installs end up feeling kind of slow and not quite right here, but it sort of ends up not mattering too much. And so we take a very clean, nice 7-0 win. As I mentioned, you was basically if they had just installed the Adore, taken some liberated money, they were actually in server 3 and probably could steal this Oak Town. They would be very, very poor, so I could probably just draw and put another agenda in, but that would put me at 2 points because I would have had to forfeit the hostile takeover, and this would be a very different game. But I think this shows one of the strengths of the new card Trick of Light in the list, and going for a slightly more glacier-y sort of build. Alright, so we're going to go on to the second game against you. In this game we're going to see a little bit more of Manic Arms Skunkworks, the other big change we made to this list, as well as the reason that Pharaohs kind of ends up feeling good. So I think this is a nice kind of confirmation of some of the good changes we made and some of the bad I made, and some of the bad changes I made. This hand's pretty rough. We mulligan and end up with an even rougher hand. So the Spin Doctor draw here is fantastic. This is, for those of you who maybe don't do this, one of the best uses of Spin Doctor if you're this flooded is you're just going to dump 2 agendas. I drew an extra time so I could install an ice. I'm still prioritizing building a remote in a lot of cases, especially when I have this sort of hand where I'm not going to get a lot of ice and I want to be somewhat aggressive to compensate for my poor early start. Just a note, so you shuffled in Trickster, Taka, Earthrise, and Cleaver. I think the Trickster Taka, either Bravado or Paladin Poemu, is going to make you more money over the course of the game, generally. But that's like such a small thing, I don't think it's that. Anyway. So Palisade's a pretty nice thing to go with here if we didn't already have Aket. Archer's not as good. So we're going to really suboptimally place our ice here. Because we do want to protect HQ with 2 agendas and a trashable. So sort of stack up. The runner just sort of continues to build up their board. We start using wall to wall to keep our tempo going. Hordom is really just clicking for a credit, but it threatens some other stuff, so it's not unreasonable. And this is one of the places where having this Manic Arm is nice. It goes in and protects our wall to wall. It's a little obvious what this is, but I think that's alright. And now I'm returning it because I think my thinking is they've got 2 of their 3 breakers out, but they still haven't found their cleaver. So I need to start speeding up the tempo of the game. So I'm going to install advance in Oaktown, and then just bluff with the archer that I have something they care about, and they have to have a harder time just botulisting through, and then I'll have the Man-at-Arms Skunkworks because they're going to be on only 6 credits at the start of the turn. So they have to get breakers down and get in early, or be able to pay the premium. So this Man-at-Arm functions like an ice, but it doesn't care about the icebreaker, it cares about the turn order. So I think this is sort of where it can look good. Now the runner happens to just have the great burst hand of Gamble Bravado, and we can't really res here because then we are losing a lot of threat on this remote, and we can actually 5 plus 4 is 9. That would mean we actually wouldn't be able to score the Oaktown if we res Aket, Man-at-Arm, and Whoredom. And it's still very plausible that the runner like just hard calls a Botulus or a Boomerang on this ice and runs. And giving up a couple of single accesses is okay, especially when we have 3 of the 10 agendas in the deck already in hand or on the board. And here I'm not going to res again because I want to stay above 10 credits so I can play Government Subsidy. With Ice Carver down, Whoredom is basically blank. It's a 1 credit piece of ice, so it's also just not worth resing generally. And I'll give up some extra accesses if I need to. We see that you trash CSR campaign, which is again I think one of the cards I would cut if I stick with this list some more. And here I'm just gonna keep putting out tempo plays. And this time the runner does hard call the Boomerang, and I make a choice that I honestly still I'm not sure if it's right. I end up resing this archer. I know that they can break it. My thinking is they're going to spend 8 credits to break the archer, which is a pretty good trade. And then they'll have to deal with the Man-at-Arms Skunkworks. So it's going to set them back a lot of tempo. So here, basically, U is playing very nicely. They've got 2 clicks, which is the better cost in this situation to pay, because that gives them the credits they need to go and trash the Man-at-Arms Skunkworks. If they didn't, basically Archer plus Man-at-Arm was probably enough to keep them out of that server indefinitely. The nice thing here, though, the runner is on 3 credits. They don't have a good solution for Aket Archer, so I can put down an extra and the run barrier, and then just start advancing an Atlas. The runner now has to spend time recovering, which they do pretty ably. I think you could go for scoring the Atlas here. The reason I went for the wall-to-wall is so that I can continue to keep the pace going, because this server is fragile, these servers are fragile, and the runner will be able to get some pressure down, and like if they got down a Stargate, this would be a pretty bad board state for me, so I want to have some draw to get through. And again, I'm flying through this because really the focus of this video was on deck building, but I think hopefully these games can show how deck building can open up some options. Here I trash the Whoredom for the Pharaohs, because Whoredom, as we've talked about, is blank, so it's not even worth. I'm never gonna spend 4 credits to res, so don't spend 1 credit to keep it on the server. Advancing once because I don't want to draw last click, and because HQ is still a very weak piece of ice. Yes, they don't have a barrier breaker, but they're halfway through their deck. Their odds of having one are pretty reasonable at this point. We keep drawing cards. 2 Trick of Lights is really nice. That means we can actually score something like a Oaktown from hand. And we're just slowly building up, putting the extra advancement on Pharaohs, so that we can make R&D much less porous. A 10 strength Pharaohs, a 10 strength barrier is pretty hard to break if they're on Cleaver, which they probably are. We draw the agenda with wall to wall, so or technically not with wall to wall. So I forget that wall to wall and Spin Doctor are a Nambo, so I could consider putting the Spin Doctor back, but I actually think it is better because I have the 2 Trick of Lights. I can do some other tricks, which we'll see here. And I put the advancement on a cat, which is what you probably actually should do when you have two trigger lights, so that you have a single target you can pull two counters off of. Um, and so with that, I can now score Atlas with a token, which opens up a lot of ways for me to win, especially now that I can spin Doctor back to put the two Trick of Lights back in. And they go for, well, it's a double access on HQ, which is pretty solid for a Boomerang. They whiff on a Gachapon, so like there's many games where they will now have a full set of 3 breakers out, but we've now hit 4 agenda points with an Atlas counter. That should be enough to win us the game in most cases. Now I'm going to spin Doctor to put back 2 Trick of Lights, so I have some fast advance options. I draw into one, and now I'm advancing an Aket so that I can have a Pharaoh still available if I have to like Atlas for another 3/2 Trick of Light, and then hope that I'm drawing for the last hostile takeover. I could force the... Yeah, so I do try and score the Oaktown just honestly, because I didn't quite... I guess I could have Trick of Lighted here and gone Trick of Light, and then it's just trying to get the hostile in time before the runner goes, or if I can find a Jackson, just repeat the Trick of Light combo. I think my thinking was they still don't have Cleaver. This server is still very expensive to get in, and they're only at 2 points, so I can drain them through here. I probably still get ahead on time. Now they end up doing overclocked Gachapon to really save a lot of money here. We do get the extra cat counter, but basically, you know, they started the run with 14 credits, they ended it with 12. That's, you know, didn't get the taxing outcome I would like. But I wasn't too worried because again, it's now tied up 4-4, and you know we're still in a solid position. And I just want to make sure I've got stuff in hand to protect the hostile. The 1 in 5 times, or it's 4/5 times 3/4 not to lose on a single HQ access here. Whatever that math is. You get it. And so now the game is basically over. We have both one Atlas left in the deck as well as one above the law. So the runner would have to steal both of those or imp our Trick of Light for us to lose. And here we do see Pharaohs doing some work. It's going to cost the runner 10 credits to break Pharaohs, which is a good chunk of cash. They hit an off-world office, so they're at 6. And we add above the law to hand and win the game. So I think these two games against you both highlight the power of Trick of Light and Manic Arm Skunkworks, and how they allow us to, while we do slow down our early game, we improve the window where we can score with Manic Arm Skunkworks, where the runner maybe can score, but they have to invest a lot more resources. So we can go and then chain off of that window that we've just opened because the runner has had to spend all these resources on Manic Arm Skunkworks. And we also see that Trick of Light allows us to be a lot more flexible with what we can score, how we can score, and how much money we have to spend to score. This list is still running pretty rich, finding that maybe it doesn't need 3 government subsidies. And I think the CSR campaign definitely should go for something else. Exactly what, I'm not sure. Malapert Data Vault definitely looks interesting as we move to this more Trick of Light and Manic Arm Skunkworks. Like, these are key cards you want to see over and over again. And even stuff like Spin Doctor to recur them starts to seem pretty interesting. So hopefully this video has been somewhat helpful for thinking about how you tune and improve a deck list. The big lesson I want to say is don't make big sweeping changes all at once. Try and think about what's working in the deck and what's not working, and how you can make the smallest possible adjustment to your deck to take it from not working to working. You can also just throw it out and start over, which is almost what I did with this BTL list, but I think it was worth kind of seeing how much further we could go, and we ended up changing out a good number of cards. But anyway, um, the Zaya video should go up next week. But that's it for me. So have a nice day.